Paul Charnier, the editorial page editor at the Day paper. Tonight's debate in the first Selectman race in East Lyme is sponsored by the Day in conjunction with the League of Women Voters of Southeastern Connecticut. The event tonight is being recorded and will be available on theday.com starting tomorrow sometime, right up through Election Day. I'd like to introduce the participants in tonight's debate. To your right, the Democratic candidate, Camille Alberti. You can applaud. We'll let you get it out of your system. And to my right, the Republican candidate, Mark Nickerson. I'd like to thank Jeffrey Newton, the superintendent of schools, Michael Susie, the principal, the Board of Education, and again, the League of Women Voters who have been following me around at all these debates, providing the timekeeping. They do a great job, and it's very much appreciated. Thank you. So we're going to go to about an hour tonight. The format will have opening statements from both candidates, and then we're going to use what we call a 60-90-30 format. The candidate getting the question has a minute to respond. The challenger then gets 90 seconds to respond and rebut from what they heard, and then it goes back to the candidate who took that particular question to wrap up with 30 seconds. As moderator, I reserve the right to ask a follow-up question, and we'll go through that format through the debate until we have closing statements. So we had a coin flip at the beginning to determine the order of how this is going to go. We're going to begin with 90-second, up to 90-second opening statements, and first up is the incumbent First Selectman, Mark Nickerson.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to begin tonight by thanking Paul Charnier and the Day for hosting this debate, and also to the League of Women Voters. East Lyme is in a very enviable position. We are the gem of Eastern Connecticut, and I don't hesitate to say so. Our taxes have remained low and steady. Our schools are listed among the best in the state, and our beaches, walking trails, parks are treasured. Our business community is absolutely thriving. To sum it up, East Lyme is in a good place, in the best shape it's ever been. I'm proud of my accomplishments as East Lyme's first selectman during the past 5 years. You bet I'm proud. But did I do it alone? Absolutely not. Department heads, volunteer groups, nonprofit groups, boards and commission members, they all came together to raise the bar, to make things better, to find ways of doing more with less, and always giving the best of themselves so that the citizens of our town are benefited. The positive progress and management efficiencies that Paul Formica and I have stewarded over the past 12 years have been well received. Everywhere you look in town, there is evidence of excellence. This is not just a job for me. It's a labor of love. It has become my passion to improve the town, find solutions to lingering issues, and to leave the town better than I found it. Tonight, I look forward to talking about just some of our town's accomplishments, about my style of leadership and management, and the big picture plans for the future of East Lyme. Thank you.
Thank you. And now our Democratic candidate, Camille Alberti.
Thank you, Paul, the Day, the League of Women Voters, for moderating this debate, and to the Board of Ed for hosting us this evening. Thanks to all of you in the audience who have taken time out of your very busy lives to come and listen to our debate and decide who your next First Selectman will be. I'd also like to thank Mr. Nickerson. It's clear to me how much he loves our town. I too love our town. And in addition to that qualification, I have years of private industry experience in finance, management consulting, and small business ownership. I also have experience in the municipal and nonprofit sectors. I currently serve on the Board of Finance and am a trustee on the board at the Cape. You should know, however, that the job that has brought me the most joy, the job that has made me most proud, is that of mom, because raising a wonderful son has taught me more about compassion and dedication to serve than any other pursuit. My name is Camille Alberti, and I am running for first selectman because in addition to loving the people and the resources of our town, I believe I have a unique set of skills and experience to deliver on the platform that my team has put together, including quality education for all, environmental and sustainability action, responsible and tasteful economic development,
Could wrap up.
and fair and ethical standards for governance. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to ask the audience to hold their applause till we get to the other end of the debate and they hear closing statements, so we don't take up the time from the candidates answering the questions and we don't have any disruptions of the debate. And also tell the candidates, I'm in the middle here, the audience is out there, the cameras are out there. I'll take no offense if you keep your eyes straight. Don't feel you have to look at me when answering the question. I'll take no offense. Okay, so with that, the first question goes to Mark Nickerson. Mr. Nickerson, in a recent guest commentary you wrote concerning the project to convert the former Honeywell office building into a police station, you stated the architectural report showing extensive renovations costing $5.8 million, more than triple the funds available, was, quote, never intended for public consumption, close quote. So is it your contention the public was not entitled to that information and should never have seen it?
Of course not. Thank you for the question, Paul. Taking out of context, maybe, by that quote, of course, all public documents are FOIable and are public. But the architect, when he addressed the Board of Selectmen, mentioned that he didn't expect it to be a public forum. He thought he was meeting with a subcommittee to kind of go over the building and then start talking about the work that needs to be done to come to the right plan. His mistake, and he admitted it, was putting a number to it. He basically went through the building and did a high-level analysis of the entire building, what it would cost to renovate as new. That wasn't his intention. He was hired knowing the plan, and of course all documents are public, but he didn't expect that to be necessarily a published report because it wasn't the final report.
All right, and you get 90 seconds on this, Ms. Alberti.
It's interesting to me that the Board of Finance held a marathon 5-hour meeting on January 23rd, where we decided to allow the voters of East Lyme to decide on this project. The very next month, I believe it was February 20th, the town approved this budget to go forward. Here we are in October, almost nearing November, and I'm deeply concerned that this is a first pass at the numbers. To me, this indicates a clear mismanagement of project. We were told on January 23rd that a team had been in place for over a year and a half, working very hard, very diligently, doing their due diligence and getting the numbers together. And we were told on January 23rd that the amount that would be appropriated that evening for $6 million would be up to and including, and that if we didn't need the money, it wouldn't be bonded. So that left a clear impression to us that $6 million was the maximum amount of money that would be spent. Now I understand we took that down to $5 million because we knew that perhaps let's see what the true numbers are, and we could hold off on the holding cells and the Sally port, design that into the plan, but come back to us at a later point after we found out how much money was left over from the project. So to recap, here we are in October or November, which is when we thought we would have our police in, and we don't.
Thank you. You get another 30 seconds on this back and forth on this one?
Yeah, very simply, after the referendum, we put together a vision committee. I'm not on the vision committee. 3 members from the Board of Finance, 3 members from the Board of Selectmen, 3 members from the Police Commission, and I believe 2 members at large and several department heads are coming together to put a scope of work together to come up with the qualifications to hire the architect to begin with. And then the architect has taken some time to go through the building. We're going to do this project right. It will be done on budget. We were authorized a certain amount of time, money. It will be done on budget, and we're going to do it right. I'm very confident of that.
Thank you. Ms. Alberti, maybe you can clarify something for me and for the audience. So you have made the contention that Mr. Nickerson's administration badly underestimated the true cost of converting the Honeywell property into a police station, citing the architectural report. Yet when he came to the Board of Finance seeking $6 million for the project, the board, on your motion, trimmed it down to $5 million before sending it to voters. How can you criticize your opponent for underestimating the cost when you cut the expenditure even further? Shouldn't you have added money if you felt he was lowballing the project costs?
We received assurances that evening that appraisals were made on the property, that a building inspection was done. We had asked beforehand for those materials to be presented to us that evening. They never were, but we went forward based on the assumption that $6 million would be the maximum amount they would need if they would include the holding cells and the Sally Port. So there was no reason for us to believe that we could have awarded or should have awarded him more money. We thought it was appropriate to award less until they sharpened their pencils and came back with a firm estimate from the hired architect. That's it.
Mr. Nickerson, you get another 90 seconds. So, to the point that you didn't give the Finance Board what they asked for when you presented the project to them?
Well, we were pretty clear on how the process was going to work. It worked backwards than compared to the school project, where we spent about 6 years hiring an architect and coming up with a design, and we didn't have that luxury in this case. We have a police station that is in dire need of being replaced or put money into it, and we also had an offer from the Honeywell Corporation to buy their property before it went on sale. This is the order, this was the process that we delivered. My opponent not only reduced the ask, which was $6 million, but she also made the motion and also voted affirmatively. So she was obviously confident in doing her due diligence for the taxpayer. This project would be delivered on time and on budget.
You get another 30 seconds?
Well, you got me that evening on that compassion characteristic that I have. I wanted to believe you, and so I did. And now I realize I was mistaken. Here's the bottom line, folks. This project will come in on budget for $2.2 million. However, that does not include Phase 2, Phase 3, and hundreds of thousands of dollars, perhaps millions more in the coming months.
I'm just going to follow and give a minute each. Our time cap is a minute each on just a follow-up question. Just to understand your thinking on cutting the $1 million, which was attached to the Sally Port and the cells. So the town had launched an independent police department, and it was spending millions to convert a building into a new police station. Yet you felt it was a good idea for Waterford to for East Lyme to continue transporting prisoners to Waterford. Could you explain your thinking on making that $1 million cut?
I am not saying that I thought that was a good idea to continue with that arrangement. What I did say was that we had a couple of years left on our contract, so we were set. We had a way to process prisoners. So I felt confident that once the true amount of the project was figured out, the first selectman had indicated to us that there was a contingency built in that fund. And my thinking was, after you find out what the number is, come back to let us know how much contingency is left, and then we will add to that the amount that you need for holding cells and a Sally Port. we did not think that it would reach $1 million. So that is the reasoning. 2 more years were left on the agreement that we had with Waterford. We full well knew that you would be coming back to us for Sally ports and cells, but not necessarily a new roof, a new egress road, because the other roads were flooding.
Thank you. And for the follow-up to Mr. Nickerson, and again, I'll give him a minute here to follow up as I did his opponent. So can you promise East Lyme voters right now that you can provide a quality police station for the town's officers without getting additional expenditures beyond the $5 million allocated at referendum?
Yes, our vision committee was meeting right now and have the first actual drawings, the first actual plan for them to take a look at and say, this is where our police will go, not the original thing that was blown out of proportion. I do want to bring up a point that a basic task of policing is prisoner processing, and that was cut from the budget by the Board of Finance. Also, let's be clear about Phase 2 and Phase 3. Phase 2 is what was cut out of that budget. Phase 2 is the holding cells. We use the terms Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, so we'd have a clearer picture of what we're talking about. Phase 3 is what we talked about in this very room a year ago when we were talking about future needs of East Lyme. At some point, we're going to have municipal space there to move into. There'll be empty, vacant space right now. But, the library needs a wing. We can eliminate that wing need by moving departments around and expanding the library in the building they already have and eliminate an expensive project. This Phase 3. I just want to be clear on that.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to another topic, and this exchange of debate begins with Mr. Nickerson. With the General Assembly continuing to wrestle with the state's financial problems, how well positioned is East Lyme to live without state funding or to deal with the possibility of contributing toward the retirement fund of its teachers?
It's a good question. The honest answer is we're not in good position because we receive about $8 million of state aid. That's our money, by the way, that we sent to Hartford that we're getting our fair share back. And there's a formula involved here. You can't go up to Hartford and lobby for more money. There's a formula. It's ECS, Education Cost Sharing, is that formula. If that gets cut and cost sharing gets dumped on all the cities and towns in Connecticut, we're all in trouble, not just East Lyme. We, in Connecticut, have the #1 property tax burden in the country. We put more burden on small towns and big cities than anywhere else in the country. And now, because they raided the teacher pension fund, they want to put that burden on you. ECS is a formula based on all sorts of different scenarios. We get our fair share, and hopefully the state will own up to their end of the bargain and can continue to give our fair share.
Thank you, and you have 90 seconds on this. From where you sit, how well prepared is East Lyme to meet the potential for seeing state aid cut or eliminated, and the burden of paying for teacher pensions also transferred to our communities?
Here's what I feel firmly about. Hope is not a strategy. We need to take action, and we need to take action now. The biggest obstacle facing East Lyme really is coming down from Hartford. I am worried about the continuing exodus of people and businesses from our state. I am worried about the yield curve inversion that happened in August. Why? Because that is a harbinger of a recession, and we still have not recovered from the last recession. East Lyme's median household income decreased from $95,000 to $84,000 per year, while the median home price increased from $232,000 to $300,000 in the same period. This means that it is really becoming unaffordable to continue to live here. We have to act now, and we cannot rely on Hartford to fix our problems. We need to start thinking about what we can do locally. And I will tell you, that overdevelopment is not the answer. Overdevelopment brings a string of expenses that are unintended. And if you look no further than the fact that we're collecting $750,000 a year from the Gateway apartment projects that was supposed to make our taxes go down. Has yours?
Mr. Nickerson, another 30 seconds.
The two things that Connecticut does very, very well, maybe better than any other state, is we have great small towns. We have great communities. We suffer for that sometimes because we don't have counties, and we think like silos sometimes. And I'm sure we'll talk about regionalization at some point tonight. But the other thing we do really good is we have great education. We give our teachers the tools they need. We build our schools. We value education, and we're known for that. Cutting state funding to small towns will be disastrous for Connecticut.
Thank you. Next question begins with Camille Alberti. You talked about development. The town indeed has seen much development in recent years, and it's continuing. The Gateway Common Apartments, the Costco. Is it time to take pause, or should development and expanding the tax base remain a priority? And you have a minute.
I believe it is absolutely time to take pause. We need to figure out all of the projects that we have in the pipeline and determine whether our infrastructure can handle those projects coming down the pipeline. Right now, we have a tri-town agreement with New London and Waterford to process our sewerage. And we have more projects on the books than we can handle with that. What does that mean? Either we're going to have to do some reallocation based on the levels that are already assigned to these three towns, and perhaps maybe four if you include Old Lyme, or we're going to need to think about putting in more capital to expand the capacity in New London. So yes, it is time to put the brakes on and reevaluate what our town should look like, where we want to go, and let's put the plan in place before we steamroll all these projects.
Mr. Nickerson, you get 90 seconds on this topic.
It's a tough, broad question. We are negotiating the new 20-year agreement, the Tri-Town agreement with New London. We've begun that process as chair of the Water and Sewer Commission. If we do not get extra capacity, more capacity in our sewers for our sewer system, that alone will curb development. But we can't just tell a landowner, an owner of a piece of property, that they can't develop unless we go into an emergency moratorium. And that could happen. We do have development going on right now. Remember, we're 4%. All the land mass in East Lyme, 4% of it is commercial and industrial space. The rest of it is residential, open space, etc. So we're not overdeveloped, and we can't all of a sudden become this town with all this urban sprawl and big box unless we choose as citizens to change the zoning, and I don't see anybody with a lot of passion to do that.
Thank you. Get another 30 seconds on this exchange.
We have over 70 parcels of land in our town that are considered to be open space, and they have been designated as desirable parcels to acquire for conservation. If we don't put the mechanism in place right now to be able to afford to acquire that open space, that probably means more residential development, which requires more resources than the revenues coming in for those types of developments.
Thank you. Next question begins with Mark Nickerson. Over 4 years ago, you and developer Glenn Russo signed an MOU, which called for the town to assist the developer in finding another property in return for him abandoning his plans for Osaguachi Hills, a very unpopular project in this town. Is it fair to say at this point that effort failed? And if so, how do you propose to address the matter moving forward?
That's a good question. About 18 years ago, I was named as the zoning chairperson, and my very first application was Mr. Russo's very first application for affordable housing. So nobody in this town has worked with Glenn Russo more than I have. We're still in a process of trying to stop development of Oswegatchie Hills or limit development. We're currently in negotiation right now for an alternate plan than that land swap idea. It was a great idea, but then when we went to the feds and said we'd like to trade some land, they said, well, no, that's not how the process works. They have to offer it to the towns first and all these nonprofits, and there's a whole process with federal land that we couldn't make that swap. That we had land identified, and both parties were agreeable to it. We just couldn't make the deal happen with the federal and state government. I met with Senator Blumenthal's office, and we sat down in his office to try to work this out, and it couldn't happen. But there is a negotiation in process right now. I can't talk about it, but I suspect that we'll hear something in the next 6 months of an opportunity.
So if elected, how would you deal with the Oswegatchie Hill situation?
Well, you heard from the man himself that a deal is being considered that he can't talk about. So I don't know what's in the pipes, but what I do know is that memorandum of agreement was signed in May of 2015. It has been 4 years and no progress, no visible progress has been made from what I can tell. It has yielded no solution, that agreement. What we do know is that the state Supreme Court has sided in favor of the developer and allowed him the infrastructure that he needs to develop affordable housing on that property. So in my mind, what we need to do is figure out a way to raise funds with the Oswegatchie Hills Coalition, maybe some tax revenues, maybe lots of land grants from land trust organizations and maybe some federal grants. We need to figure out now how we're going to start raising money to acquire these natural resources that we have to protect them for future generations, so that even if Oswegatchie Hills doesn't quite pan out like we hope it will, we can prevent this from happening in the future.
Mr. Nickerson, if you'd like to comment further, you get another 30 seconds.
Yeah, again, we're 18 years into this process, and not one shovel of dirt has been turned for development. The town is winning the battle where we may have lost one court case about sewer capacity. It doesn't give them the right to build up there, nor does it give them the right to develop land and have access and sewer access and water access. There's a lot to this complicated process. We worked very hard. Senator Formica, myself, Senator Blumenthal worked very hard in putting some deals together. We also talked to the state about some properties. That didn't yield. It didn't mean we didn't work for it.
Thank you. Next question goes to Camille Alberti. Can you describe a concrete strategy you would use to conserve open space in East Lyme, including how you would acquire funds for the land?
In our
And
platform,
make sure, get the mic up. Just want to make sure everyone hears us.
we have so many individuals working for us, whether it's as a town employee or as a volunteer on some of our commissions, with knowledge that far exceeds anything I've acquired in my 57 years. And I will tap into those resources, those experts, to help them, to lead them in creating a mission and then coming up with a plan that we can implement to execute that mission. So certainly there is some legislation on the books that may enable us to raise funds through real estate transactions. I'm not saying that I think that is a good or a bad idea. I am saying that I will need to research that and find out if that is the best way to raise funds. In addition to that, we will work with private organizations to develop funds.
Thank you. And Mr. Nickerson, it came from a reader. Could you describe a strategy you would use to conserve open space in East Lyme and find the funds to pay for it?
We've created a lot of open space through our planning commission, through our zoning commission, where we require open space as part of a development. That's very important to remember. We've put on a lot of open space in this town. When you see a development, there's also an open space component attached to that. that doesn't cost the taxpayers money. We've also added open space that has cost the taxpayers money. We bond for open space. We've done this several times in the last decade. But it costs money, and in this economy, and with these taxes, and with the burden to property taxes in Connecticut, we have to be very careful of that. We have I've been told about 20% of our land mass is open space. We also have the Yale property and the Niantic Forest and the Rocky Neck State Park, which is all open space swaths of land as well. So we have a lot of open space in our town already. But we'll certainly be looking for more opportunity to put open space on there.
Thank you. Ms. Alberti, anything further?
Yes, I do. The problem when this town acquires open space is we have a bad tendency to overpay for the property. The reason I got involved with the Board of Finance to begin with was because I was very upset over the acquisition of the Darrows Ridge property for $4 million when I know the developer could not unload that property just a few years prior for $1 million.
And I'm going to give Mr. Nickerson another 30 seconds because a point was raised that your challenger feels the town's been overpaying in some cases to acquire this open space.
The one piece of property at Darrow Pond, there was another bidder, and very much in the mix there. So I have to correct the record that there was someone looking to acquire that to put development on that land. Dozens or 100 homes would be up on Darrow Pond and into the woods there. So it was very, very much a priority for the town to acquire that land. Mr. Formica did a fabulous job putting that into, and that land connects to the Yale property, which connects to the central part of the state. It's an important piece of property that connects to all this other open space. It's again another thing that Connecticut does very, very well.
Thank you. Next question begins with Mr. Nickerson. You have discussed the possibility of a property tax abatement program for seniors. Would it be needs-based? Because there are certainly some well-off retirees in the town who can better afford their taxes than some working people. Or would eligibility be tied strictly to age?
I did announce plans to look into a senior, kind of a homestead act like Florida does, where we'd freeze or only allow property taxes to go up a certain percentage, or a tax abatement, let's say $1,000 off. We don't have the details out yet. There's a lot to this actuarially. You know, if we give a senior $1,000 off, well, it's young families who are also struggling to raise families and try to put a few nickels away for college education, they're struggling too. So we have to look at that. You know, it's important to try to keep our seniors in the homes. That if they've been paying taxes here for 35 or 40 years, we'd rather them not move out and have a family with a bunch of kids coming in, and nothing wrong with families with bunches of kids, but that's kids in our school system, and we know that that's a liability, not an asset when it comes to the costs of that. We're still looking into that. I'll follow up with some more detail.
Your thoughts, Ms. Alberti, on some kind of tax breaks for our seniors as discussed by our first selectman?
I wouldn't look at the tax abatement program in a silo for seniors. I would also take a look at what we might be able to do for veterans that live in our town that are having difficulty paying their property tax bills. Maybe some service workers, volunteer firemen maybe could use some help with property tax in exchange for their services. I don't want to look at any one subset of the population, again, in a silo. I want to look at the entire population of people that we have that are contributing to our tax base and figure out a fair and met out a fair system to take care of all these folks. I was very much in favor of the recent legislation that reduced the tax burden on retired citizens. So they have a lower income tax bill on their retirement income. I think that certainly goes a long way for helping seniors to stay in Connecticut. But we can do more. We need to take a look at it. There is a program in place for the seniors currently. I don't know how effective it is or how many of the seniors know about it or are even enrolled in it. But this needs to be part of a comprehensive plan to make sure everybody gets a fair shake.
Ms. Nickerson, you get another 30 seconds to react to what you heard there.
Okay, a lot there. First of all, we just implemented a volunteer fireman tax abatement. These folks do so much for us, and they do it voluntarily. They truly do. They get up out of bed in the middle of the night and save lives. We gave them a $1,000 tax abatement. Also, we do give veterans a tax credit as well. It's a state program that we partake in. But I'm thinking the person who's paid taxes for 35 years, maybe 70 years old, maybe 65. Again, we have to run the numbers on this. And maybe there would be an income bracket. Maybe if you make, if your Social Security, if your retirement is under, say, $200,000, it would be a large amount. But we don't want to give the tax abatement away to millionaires as much as, just making it fair and balancing it off. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, the next question goes to Camille Alberti. In your interview with The Day, you said that if elected, you would develop, quote, sound policies and procedures for fair and ethical business practices, close quote. So it is your contention that the current administration is not pursuing sound policies and fair and ethical business practices?
Well, I know every year when the auditors come before the Board of Finance, they have findings that we are weak in certain policies and procedures, and work needs to be done on that. And year after year, very little is accomplished in that regard. It took the Board of Selectmen over 2 years just to develop a purchasing policy that we had been asking for a number of years. And at first I thought maybe I would get involved because I have this experience, I have the time to help out Anna Johnson, our finance director, in developing some of these procedures. But then I calculated, according to the auditor, there's over 70 policies that need to be rewritten. And if I multiplied that by 2 years, that would take 140 years to complete. And I just don't have that time.
Mr. Nickerson.
I think it's an unfair statement to suggest that the policies in place aren't doing their job. We run a very efficient town. Our department heads are they don't just punch a clock. In our crews, and the guys in the trucks, and all the way down, they don't just punch a clock. They serve our town, and they do it with pride. But specifically back to policies and department heads, they adhere to policies, and they are ethical. Beyond reproach. We do get audited, and it's the Board of Finance that hires the auditor and responds to the auditor. The auditor reports to the Board of Finance. There are some policies that we are putting in place and committing to writing. It's not that we don't have them, but they're more verbal or more casual in nature. They might be on a one-page white paper where we want to get into a deeper report. But again, I think it's an unfair statement because this town is quite efficient. Our department heads are again, beyond ethical, and I'm very proud of the work that our town department heads do and the amount of work we put out with the limited number of personnel that we have.
Another 30 seconds, Ms. Alberti.
Well, I would just disagree that the entire workforce is behaving ethically. I do think that we need to shore up our policies and procedures to make sure that people are behaving ethically. Not only has there been past occurrences of misconduct, but we are currently undergoing investigations for misconduct.
And next question goes to Mark Nickerson. Earlier in your administration, there was some preliminary discussions with the town of Lyme about potentially linking your police services, extending your department. You know, I have plans for the new police facility near the old Lyme border. What do you see as the prospects for potentially pursuing that kind of relationship?
Well, we've pursued it, indeed. We got a little bit of resistance from Old Lyme. They put a task force together. Frankly, I think it was, it was weighted down with some people who had different opinions and maybe opposite opinions of what we were trying to accomplish. I did meet with the union representative today who represents our union, our police union. We have an MOU we're working on in the police department, but he also represents Old Lyme. And we talked about the struggles, we talked about the conflict. It's a real problem. We all talk about regionalization, but when you try to marry two unions together, and the pensions and the seniority when they're bidding on shifts, it's a real struggle. And part of that, you know, we love our small towns, but we don't want to give up our independence. But we talk about a good game about regionalization, yet it's very difficult to implement. I'm hopeful that the building gets built, we're in there, and they look over across the border and go, yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Let's give it a try.
Ms. Alberti?
Could you repeat the question, please? I got
Yes,
a little lost.
yeah. Early on
dialogue.
in Mr. Nickerson's current term, there was some discussions with the town of Old Lyme about the potential for Old Lyme utilizing the East Lyme police force, extending it into Old Lyme. So curious to see what level of interest, if you were elected first selectman, you would have in pursuing such an idea.
I would like to take a more comprehensive approach to identify all the areas that should be considered for regionalization. I wouldn't want to take one step at a time. I'm not really sure that Bonnie Ream-Snyder is at all interested in joining forces with us, but I would have that discussion with her going forward, especially since if we remained with this Honeywell building as the police department, going forward, that would seem to make sense.
Mr. Nickerson, maybe not one at a time, a more comprehensive approach. You get 30 seconds to respond.
It was Bonnie that came to me before we were even looking at the police station, because we did go independent, and there's a struggle with towns and the state police. It's good. We were all safe during those many decades, but it's a difficult relationship. And she saw what we were able to do and the efficiencies we brought to our police force when we went independent. We had a strong manager in town that was our employee, not a state residence trooper, and they struggle over there as well. Yes, there's a whole list of regional opportunities, and be happy to talk about them.
Thank you. Next question goes to Ms. Alberti, and this kind of boils down the election to its essential element. As the challenger, you are essentially asking voters to fire the incumbent and hire you. Why should they do so? And Mr. Nickerson, when you get a chance, why should they rehire you? Get the first crack at that one from a reader.
Again, this goes back to my main concern and the main challenge that I see facing East Lyme, and that has to do with fiscal responsibility. And I see a lot of projects that are being mismanaged and a lot more money being spent than I think is necessary. So I have a very disciplined approach to project management. That's what I did for a living. That's what my job depended on. I came in not only on budget and on time, but I delivered the results that my employers and my customers demanded.
Thank you. You get another 90 seconds. Why should voters rehire you come November 5th?
Well, first, I'd like my opponent, hopefully she'll spend some time talking about specific projects. We talked about the public safety building, and she has a different opinion than I do with my confidence that this will come in properly and on time. But I'd like to hear specific projects when you have the opportunity that you think are being not managed correctly. Listen, I love this town. We are on a roll. We have improved this town. We are We are better off than we were 5 years ago. We're certainly better off than we were 12 years ago when Senator Formica took the helm. People move here, they stay here, they love it here, they move here because of the schools, they stay here for the beauty, for the people, for the neighborhoods, for the natural surroundings. I bring energy and inspiration to the job. I inspire people to go out and get it done. One thing about First Selectman is you can't do anything alone. You need a team around you. And you can't be everywhere at once. So you have to build trust with your department heads who are out there getting the job done every day, representing the town. Even our crews representing the town. I bring that management style of inspiration and building trust. And I hope that you'll vote for me for another 2 years. We are in a good place, and I want to take us to another place, a better place.
Thank you. Ms. Alberti, another 30 seconds. Any examples of this mismanagement you're concerned about?
One specific project is the public safety building. Had I known that this project in 3 to 5 years' time would cost between $8 and $10 million, I would have said, let's build new with a 100-year lifespan in a more central part of town. If I was in charge of that project, I would have ensured that the numbers were concrete before rolling it out. The other concern I have is drinking water, and I don't think that we're paying enough attention to the quality of the drinking water that we have in this town.
All right, thank you. Next question goes to, well, I think you'll have an opportunity with this question. Mr. Nickerson, what do you see as the 1 or 2 biggest challenges facing our town, and how do you plan to address them?
Drinking water. How's that for an answer? I don't think it's our biggest challenge. I think development is. I think sewer capacity is. I think the saving of Oswegatchie Hills is. But we are building a new water filtration system. We were bonded $5 million, the Water and Sewer Department did, and we're going to rebuild 2 of our largest producing water wells and tie them together and build a filtration system. We have very hard water in the coastline of Connecticut, a lot of manganese. And we're looking to pull that out of our water and have better drinking water. We have an aging infrastructure. We are putting more emphasis on our infrastructure. In fact, we're putting in radio-controlled water meters so we don't have to send the guys out twice a year to read the water meter on the side of your house. We can do that remotely now, and we can also detect water leaks quicker. And then our guys can spend more time on maintenance and preventive maintenance, which will also extend the life of our water system.
And we'll get back to you in another 30 seconds, but first we'll hear from the challenger. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing our town, town of East Lyme, and how would you address them?
So again, the biggest challenge I see is fiscal responsibility. Second, protection of our natural resources. We can't protect our drinking water if we don't protect our aquifers. And we will not protect our aquifers if we continue to build concrete services over them. This creates a runoff from sand and salt, perhaps even gasoline. We need to stop changing the rules and regulations on our books to accommodate big developers. We cannot shrink the size of our aquifers on a map to accommodate their desire to put in gas stations.
Mr. Nickerson, you get a chance to respond to that. 30 seconds.
I think our biggest challenge is really always going to be the state of Connecticut. You know, we're a great little town. I see this a lot. We're a great little town, but we're in the state of Connecticut. And no offense to our representatives who are here tonight. They're doing a fabulous job representing us. But the state of Connecticut is in a dire place. And again, if the burdens of Hartford start coming down here, putting the teacher retirement, the fund that they raided, and education cost sharing, all those unfunded mandates that they make us do through education and now don't pay for them, that's troubling, and that will be the biggest burden of our town.
And I want to give you another 30 seconds, give you a chance to respond to a specific point that was raised by Ms. Alberti, and that was allowing a service station to be built on a concrete surface above town aquifer.
Well, she did half her homework. It's not on the aquifer. The gas station is not on the aquifer. The state doesn't allow gas stations to be built on aquifers. That's a state rule. We couldn't do it if we wanted to do it. Our Aquifer Protection Agency is the zoning commission. They approved this after looking at all the maps. The maps were redone scientifically. They put they put wells in the ground and found out where the water is actually flowing under the ground. So back in the 60s, when they just kind of drew a crayon on a map and said, that's our aquifer, they did it scientifically. The gas station that's being built has high technology for spills, and it's not on the aquifer.
Thank you. I'll give another 30 seconds to respond to what you heard, Ms. Alberti.
So again, when you shrink the aquifer on a map, it's easy to sort of bypass, the exact regulations. But the point is, there are 4 other gas stations within a quarter-mile radius of this gas station. So not only are we concreting more impervious surfaces, but we'll probably put out of business a couple of mom-and-pop stores. Why didn't we negotiate a deal with one of those gas stations to put Costco over there?
Thank you. Next question is to Camille Alberti. It comes from a reader sent to us. You were a vocal supporter of a 2 elementary school solution, but ended up backing the final renovate as new option. And you also noted your reservations about the plan to renovate the Honeywell building for a police station, but you ended up signing off on that as well. So the reader questions, does that suggest a lack of decisiveness on your part? And you get a minute to respond to our reader.
A lack of decisiveness? Not at all. I do my homework, and I make it known by asking the tough questions and making sure that responses to those questions are on record. Sometimes a project is bigger than just 6 people sitting behind a desk in a public forum. So I made it known when I went to vote for the 2 elementary school solution that I was against it, that I believe 2 elementary schools was the way to go. But nevertheless, I was going to pass it to referendum because I think we had a tremendous turnout of all the folks in town who were participating in the process and understanding it and deserved a chance to vote on that. We could afford it. That was the best deal that came around in a long time. And that's our primary responsibility on the Board of Finance, is to make sure that it's affordable and we can bond it.
Thank you. While the question is addressed to your opponent, you're certainly welcome to comment.
Well, it was more directed to my opponent, but I will say that my opponent did support the 2-school system that was $86 million, and the plan was to close the Niantic Center School. Many people came out to many meetings to fight for their school. First it was Lily B, and then it was Niantic Center School. I think we did the right thing by scaling down the project to a renovate project, not renovate as new. And we have 3 shiny schools now, and I hope you get a chance to view them. That was your tax dollars that went in these schools. Fabulous job. I got into office, it was $86 million. We brought it down to a $37 million project. No, we didn't get a lot of state funding back because we didn't renovate as new. We didn't strip the buildings down to the steel, but we have the kids now in safe environments. We have the teachers and administration in safe environments, both the HVAC and the air quality and the security in the building. So very important. And updates to the building themselves, cosmetic and flow of the building, etc. I'm very proud of what we did to get this project done because it was stalled for a whole long time. And the 3-school project ended up being the way to go, especially, again, in this economy.
Get another 30 seconds, if you so choose.
I'd just like to set the record straight. I was not the one that said to close Niantic Center School. I said certainly that was a possibility, but we had 3 schools, any one of which could have been repurposed. Mark, I believe you were the one that wanted to close Niantic Center School because you wanted to continue the redevelopment of Main Street down to Smith Acres. I am still I still wish that we did have a two-school solution based on the declining enrollment.
Thank you. The next question begins with Mr. Nickerson. Came from a merchant along Main Street in Niantic. Amtrak is offering assurances it will finally replace the chain link fence along the tracks in Niantic with decorative fencing, but nothing yet. And our reader was skeptical. Do you see any means of applying pressure to get this done, or does the town have to wait and hope?
It's not in our control, but we finally made headway with Amtrak, and I've been assured it's in their 2020 fiscal budget. That starts in October of 2020. But I also was assured by the gentleman I made contact with, and this gentleman's been around since we realigned the Amtrak. Mr. Famika worked on it with this gentleman for quite a long time. We've been assured that we're going to get a new fence. There's a security problem there at this point, and they've already. And the assurance I would give your reader is that they are already doing some of this in Stonington and Noank. The same fence is being installed, so they're coming down the line to do it. We're happy that it's getting done. It's an eyesore, and really it's that last checkbox of the Niantic Main Street beautification. We sat down 15, 20 years ago and talked about how to revitalize Main Street, and we did it with brick sidewalks and lamps and restaurants and all that, but also it was that park and replacing the chain link fence.
All right, thank you. Any thoughts what you might do as first selectwoman, if elected, to try to persuade Amtrak?
This is sort of a sore subject with me because when we were first designing that park, I had a number of ideas that I wanted to put forward to the first selectman to develop more of a public-private partnership. I think it's terrific that we bought that building, the old mobile station, demolished it, put a park in there, but I think we completely missed an opportunity to have a public-private partnership. And none of my ideas, well, let's just say they were summarily dismissed. As far as the Amtrak fence is concerned, I know that people have concerns now that you won't be able to view the water. So I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I would have to study that further before I commented on that particular design of fence.
You get another 30 seconds. Your opponent raised the issue of ideas she had for the park. She says weren't really considered seriously.
There was a committee that was put together to decide the park's fate and how it would look. Made up of citizens and Parks and Rec people. I was on that committee. I was one of many. I don't recall any ideas, frankly, but I'm sure many people, I received many ideas from many people. There'll be no need to persuade Amtrak to do this, Paul. It's in their budget, and I have confidence they'll get it done.
All right, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. It begins with Camille Alberti. So why do you choose to identify with the party you do? You're a member of the Democratic Party, Mr. Nickerson, a member of the Republican Party. And how do you expect your political association will be reflected in the way you govern if elected?
Only 60 seconds?
Afraid so.
I have a story. I am currently aligned with the Democratic Party. I was a former Republican, basically because that's the way I was brought up. But anybody knows me knows that I take a look at the issue, and I'm an issues-based person. So my ideology doesn't neatly align with any one party. If there was an independent party in town, I would probably be part of that group. We have 5,500 unaffiliated voters, but there is no independent party that would represent them if they chose to run. I chose to run on the Democratic platform because quite frankly, I was blacklisted from the Republican Town Committee.
All right, Mr. Nickerson. You're a Republican. How come?
I didn't hear that part. Did I miss something? I missed that last one. Wish I heard it. I was an independent when I moved to town, and when I got involved, and the Republicans were winning seats. Mr. Frazier was the first selectman, and I got involved in his second term in 1999. We have a good bench on the Republican side. I don't think the Republicans, listen, I am a Republican. But when it comes to governing a small town, it has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do about taking care of the citizens of our town. Small towns, listen, if you go to the big cities, it's all about politics. But we get things done in East Lyme because we don't play political games. And Democrats and Republicans alike sit on committees and commissions, and they don't vote party lines. This is an awful process. We all have to go through it. I'm seeing a lot of the people running for seats. This happens every couple of years in municipal elections, and it's good because it does allow the voter to choose one over another, good candidates. We can't have just one party because, it would just be the people who signed up. It would be a club rather than a political process. It's still American, it's still democracy, and we do need to vote for people and choose. But the people that typically rise to the top and get seats in East Lyme are the people that care for East Lyme and put party politics aside and do what's right. And I'm very proud to be part of that.
And Ms. Alberti, you get another 30 seconds.
When I said that I decided to go to the Democratic Party, it was because I was told by the Republican Town Committee that I had to vote for their candidate for a replacement for our then chairman of the Board of Finance. I asked who they had in mind. They said they didn't know. I said, so are you telling me that I have to vote for your candidate because of the little letter at the end of their name? And she told me yes. I said, I don't work for you. I don't work for this party. I work for the people who elected me into office, and I will make the best decision for them.
All right, thank you. With that, we're going to move to closing statements. I want to thank the audience. It's been very respectful. I think it was a very good discussion on a lot of issues. And again, by the flip of the coin, person that goes first is Mr. Nickerson, and you have 1 minute for your summation.
Thank you to Paul Chenair, the day, and for the League of Women Voters for putting this on this evening. It's my hope that the voters of East Lyme agree that this is not a time for a change. Changing our course and heading in a different direction would not be wise. Our town is vibrant. Our citizens are passionate about our town. Our education system is among the best in Connecticut, and we need to commit to keep it that way. Our teachers and first responders need to be fully supported and deserve working in a safe and professional environment. I love this town. Next month will mark my 20th year of dedicated service, commitment, and personal sacrifice that I've made to East Lyme. Experienced leadership is the secret to East Lyme's success. My heartfelt dedication to serving our town unselfishly and inspiring greatness in department heads, staff, and commission members is my strength. I ask the voters to continue to move the town in the right direction, to continue our momentum, to stay the course. My name is Mark Nickerson. I am your first selectman, and I ask for your vote a week from today. Thank you.
And last word in closing statement, and you have a minute, is from Camille Alberti.
Leadership requires the ability to make difficult decisions. Great leadership demands that those decisions prove to be right more often than not. I make decisions based on a thorough understanding and analysis of the issues at hand with one goal in mind. That is to serve the people of East Lyme with honesty, integrity, and transparency. I have embodied these principles for my entire career, and I will continue to live by these principles when in office. I believe your choice is clear. If you want a leader who welcomes, respects, and considers your opinions, even when it is contrary to their own, then I am your choice. If you want someone who cares more about doing what's right for the town rather than getting votes, then I am your choice. If you are proud of our town but believe we should never stop improving, then I am your choice. I am Camille, and I would be grateful to receive your vote on Election Day. Thank you, and good night.
And I thank both our candidates for being willing to run for office. And again, thank the audience. And that concludes tonight's debate. Thanks for coming.